hat, and I have this leftover Karen Simply Soft. It is 100% acrylic just because I like my hats to be sturdy, and if I'm not using cotton, this is usually what I'm using. So we start off with a slip stitch, and we're going to flip it over and pull it through, and we're going to use that loop for our starting point. So our slip stitch goes onto our hook, which I'm using a 5.75 J hook. This one I think gives me a nice stretch. Now we're going to be doing a brim hat, so we're not starting off with a magic circle. We are going to chain 10. And make sure that we go over and do a half double crochet. So that's where you yarn over, go through the next crochet loop, pull it through, and then go through all 3. With a double crochet, that's whenever you go through 2, then go through 2 again, but this is going to be where we go through all 3. And that way we can have a nice build up that you'll see with our stretch later on. So it's very important that we do a half double crochet. Now with the brim hats, we got to make sure whenever we get to the opposite end that we have the same amount. Otherwise you'll have a curve and it won't be as symmetrical. Then we turn our work and we're going to chain 2. And that chain 2 is going to count as our first one. So whenever you do your counting, make sure you count that. The half double crochet is going into the next loop because we don't need to go in the first one. We've already got our chain 2 for that. And then we'll half double crochet into the back of the crochet. So that way the top of the crochet that you usually see, that V shape, is going to be in the front, and that's what's going to give us a ridge look, but it also makes it easier for us to have a stretch for our hat rim. Whenever we have gone through all of the back posts, whenever we get to the end, just to make it a little bit more symmetrical, we're going to anchor it into the whole thing. And it's not going to be noticeable just on the ends. So we'll chain 2 again, turn our work, and continue to double crochet into that back post. Make sure you hold on to your front to just kind of keep it from pulling, because whenever you go into that back post, you can kind of see how it's starting to stretch a little bit. It gives it a nice ribbed look, but it also gives it a little bit extra stretch, so that way it's more comfortable and form-fitting on your head. Again, we're going to go into the whole crochet, and that helps it to anchor itself. Now you can count it out loud, or you can just count it at the end whenever you're done, or as you go. It's really preference. So we're going to continue to do that until we get to 21.5 inches. I didn't want to film the entire thing because it's extremely repetitive. If you need to pause here, you totally can, and then catch up with me in a second. But I am going to continue until we get to 21.5 inches. That's usually the circumference of an adult person's head. Children are anywhere from 17 for toddlers and infants to 18 for small children, but usually by the time that you are in your preteen years, you are at an average adult head size. So that would be 21.5 for a comfortable rib fitted headband on your hats. I'm going to go ahead and apologize for the audio because I have a terrible sore throat, so I am drinking tea, trying not to sound too raspy for you guys today. Alright, now make sure whenever you get to this point that you're turning it and checking it at every point, because it works up really fast. It goes anywhere, depending on the gauge of your crochet hook, from 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 of an inch per row of this ribbed stitch. So make sure that you're checking it every time. Okay, now turning everything and holding it against my measuring stick. You can see that it is definitely just over 1.5 inches, which is where it should be. Sometimes it's not exact, which is okay, as long as it's very close. You want to get it as close as you possibly can. So make sure everything is lined up perfectly, so that way you don't have to try and wiggle stuff around to make it fit. So we're going to move the tail out of the way. I realize I'm off camera for this point, but I couldn't really see that well around my camera. So I pull it through, I line up all of the stitches at the end and pull it through, so that way it is just slip stitched together, and then I can go through each point of the stitches, and that's whenever I realized that I was off camera. And then we're just going to single crochet. So you pull it through, single crochet, and basically it sews it together. Now you can overlap them, but I don't like to, so this is how I do it. If you have a different way of connecting that you're more comfortable with, please feel free to let me know, and I would love to see all the different ideas that everybody has. So again, you want to make sure that it's even. It's just like buttoning up a shirt. You don't want to have an off-center button. So go up to the very top, and we will tuck in that tail at the bottom later on. So just ignore that. Okay, so we'll go into the next stitch that presents itself, and we will connect it to the top, kind of like we anchored it to make it stable earlier. This is going to be our anchor, for starting our hat. So now we've got our last little ridge. It blends in nicely. And we're going to ignore that tail. And we have to start off our hat, but we're not going to do double crochets just yet. we're going to chain 1. We're going to go into each row as it presents itself. And that way we have a more uniform look instead of having to find it with a double crochet. Now for the gaps, you can go through the hole, but usually I just get 2 of the strands from either the chain 2 or the first double crochet. Now this first hole, you can't really help it. It's hard to see around that for the 2 yarn pieces, so sometimes I go through the whole stitch, but if it looks like it's going to stretch and just not look as uniform, then I will go through those double crochets or chain 2s in order to pick up at least 2 strands of yarn. And we're going to go all the way around until we get back to where we stitched everything together, and that will be the point where we connect it and we start on the build of the hat. If you were just here for the ribbed headband, then thank you for checking me out, and if you liked it, please let me know in the comments or press like, and I will be sure to make more tutorials on hat bands. If you are wanting to see the build of the hat, please continue for the next part of this video. Now, whenever we get back to that first single crochet or that first chain 1, now we're going to build onto that. So we're going to chain 3, and some count this. I count this as a double crochet whenever I'm going through my count, so you just skip the next one. And then we are going to go through each of those single crochets that made it more uniform, and it just, to me, makes it look a little bit nicer, makes it look smoother, and we're able to easily find the crochets that we need to go into. Now with the double crochet, we are making sure that everything is nice and tight, because again, we want our hats to be nice and warm, but not so tight that it's not breathable. So that's what I'm doing in this stitch, and we'll get back to the end. We'll skip that because that one also, the chain 3 counts, so we'll just slip stitch into that and connect it, and then we'll chain 3 again, and we'll start our next row. Now we are going to do 4 rows of double crochets, so that will be like the main part of the hat before we start decreasing, and we'll go up in the same spot, because again this counts, and then we'll go up 4, and then we'll start decreasing. So now I've skipped ahead. If you need to pause to catch up, please do so, but right now we're going to connect our 4th row, and then I will show you how to double crochet decrease. I'm not technically sure of the entire terminology, but that's what I call it. So again, we start off just chain 3, and then we're going to do counts of 5. So we're going to do 5 double crochets and then a double crochet decrease. We start our double crochet, and then we go into another double crochet. And once we have our 2 double crochets on our hook, normally we would go through 2, we're going to go through all 3. And that gets rid of that middle one. You see how it just puts 1 loop at the top for the 2 of the double crochets. That's what helps to pull it in together. So then we're going to we're going to double crochet 5 more times. And those 5 will be like the spacer. If you decrease all in one spot, it's going to lean to the opposite side. So while that looks neat on some hats, that's not what we're doing here. We're going to double crochet our 5. And make sure you turn your work so that you can see where you're at. If you have stitch markers, you can use those as well on your decreases. So we have our decrease here. You would just put it at the top, count 5 spaces from the marker, which I have them. I just could not find them where I was at this time. It was during the holidays and very hectic. So again, make a double crochet, but stop and go into the next double crochet, and then have all 3 and go through all 3 so that there is only 1 opening at the top, and it gets rid of that middle double crochet and pulls it in. And we'll go around 5 more. Now we'll yarn over, go through our first spot of our decrease. We'll have the 2 on there. I always like to double check before I do it because you will notice sometimes I do 4 because I will get distracted. But as long as it's close, right? So we'll do the double crochet again, but we'll stop and we'll go through all 3. And we're going to do that for the next few rows before we switch up the number, and I'll explain that whenever we get to it. But just make sure for the next few rows that you're counting 5, and whenever you get a little bit more comfortable with it, you'll be able to eyeball it. I do not specifically have a pattern for this. This is just something that I've been doing. And I do not have it written down. So if this looks like another pattern or something that you've seen before, please comment below with a link, because I just spend a lot of time playing with the yarn and just doing what I know to create new patterns, and that's where these hats came from. But if there is another one, I would love to also share that pattern or give credit or whatever to them as well, because this is just something I made up. It's not necessarily a pattern that I followed. Then we're going to decrease again, pull it through all 3, and you'll start to see how it is curving in whenever you lay it flat, you'll be able to see the curve of the top of the hat. And then connect it at the end the same way we did the first 4 rows. So again, we finished our first row of double crochet decreases, and as you can tell from the side, it is dipped in just a tad. We don't want it to decrease too quickly, which is why we count to 5. The less double crochets there are between decreases, the faster it will decrease. So please keep that in mind. We're going to chain 3 again. And then we are going to continue to double crochet decrease over the next few rows. So one more time, we'll do a count of 5. Now in this one, you'll notice that I don't usually count that first one, just because I feel like it puts my last double crochet decrease too close to the post. And that can sometimes make it look bumpy, or you can tell where the seam is a little bit more. You'll be able to tell where the seam is, but it's very obvious if the double crochet decrease is too close to it. Then we're going to go through all 3 and start our count of 5 over again. Alright, now we are going to take a little comic relief break and see what it's like while I'm trying to crochet and my dog just wants to play and snuggle me. He doesn't understand that he can't sit in my lap while I'm doing this. So you'll normally see me in my house talking to my dog, crocheting, and then the other one will get jealous and he'll show up, and they all need love. But we did our 4 rows of regular, and then we've got 6 rows of the decreases, and you'll see how it kind of curves in. Now the average hat needs to be from top to bottom 8 inches. And so around 7 inches, which is why we do the 6 rows, around 7 inches is where you'll want to switch to 3, because pointy hats are cute and all, but that's not really what I'm going for with this. So we'll need to decrease faster to create that dome shape of the hat. So we'll do 3 and then we'll decrease. And yes, on this one I did count the first one as a double crochet because whenever you get to the 3s, it's less likely that you will end up with a post up at next to the chain 3, but also it is less noticeable whenever you're getting to the round of the top of the hat. Basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to recreate the magic circle look, but it's like a reverse magic circle. I don't know what it's called. If you know, please comment below. Whenever you get to where you are doing the 3 double crochet count decrease, then you'll want to turn your work more frequently. Not only does this help you keep track of what number you are at, but it also helps to keep the work a little bit smoother while you are working on it. Once you lay it out flat, it'll take shape anyway. Mostly I do this because if it doesn't look right, I get a little bit discouraged and I'm more likely to give up on a project. If you are a beginner crocheter, please do not give up. Some things don't always look perfect the first time around. That's the point of practice. So we will continue to do the 3, and obviously we're not going to continue this for 6 rows. So then we will decrease even more and kind of bring it into that circular top that we enjoy so much. And then we will continue excuse me, our double crochet, and then we'll connect it to our post. Turn our work, check it, knock down our camera, check it to make sure that it is 8 inches, and once you get to 8 inches, that's where you'll want to create your circular shape, because it is going to be basically flatter once it connects. So once you get to your 8 inches, that's where you know that's where you will be decreasing more frequently. So we are going to decrease every time. There's no count in between. There's none of that. I almost knocked over my camera again. Turning your work can sometimes create problems. So we are going to decrease, double crochet decrease again. And this, whenever you are working from top to bottom, I will gladly make a video on that. You start with a magic circle and you increase every single point. So this is again what I meant by a reverse magic circle hat. So that way we can build into a circle instead of building from a circle, if that makes any sense at all. Then we are going to connect it, and then I will show you how to situate everything together. whenever we get to that first chain 3, we're going to slip stitch into the top of it. Now again, we have a very small opening, so it's kind of difficult to keep track of. So we're going to make a long tail. We're going to snip it. We're going to take a yarn needle. We're going to slip that all the way through, just kind of tie it off. Whenever we go through that last little loop, it'll create a knot, and it's less likely to come apart if you tie that off. So tie it off, make sure it's secure, nice and tight, so that way it doesn't pull or kind of like bulge out or anything like that. Then we're going to put our yarn onto our needle and go through each crochet top. You don't have to go through the yarn itself because we're going to pull it together, so you need that extra room so that there's no resistance. It's a little bit easier to pull it through without snagging and pulling and possibly making frayed edges. So what this does is this creates a circular shape, and I know I've said it many times, I'm going to say it one more time. This is going to make it look like a magic circle. And whenever I pull it, you'll be able to see it more definedly. And that's what gives it its hat top. So this is the circle. Hold on to the circle and pull it so that it rounds itself out. It looks really nice. It looks like that's the point you started from, even though, as you know, we did not. So I like to pull it through and extra secure it, so I go through 2 pieces of the yarn. I leave a nice little bubble at the top, put my yarn needle through, wrap it over so that there's 2, and I feel like that just secures it more. I know it's secured at the top, now it's secured at the bottom. And now we will go through the yarn towards the side, and then we'll snip it. Now this is inside the hat, you're not going to feel it if it's got a little tiny tail, but we will flatten it out. It's got a nice dome shape. It is 21.5 inches around. It is 8 inches from top to bottom, so it will fit an adult. And don't worry, I didn't forget about the tail. While we have our yarn needle out, we will go through the ridging of the headband of the hat, and this helps to secure it. So through the yarn. You've got to pick up some pieces of yarn so that it kind of just hugs itself together, and it won't come back out, and you don't have to worry about snipping it too close to where maybe it would come untied in the washer. And like I said, there's a little bit of a seam, but it's not super noticeable. So this is the front of the hat, this is the back of the hat, and we've got a nice uniform ribbed headband on our little winter hat. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this, please make sure to subscribe. I'm going to try and put out more content within the next few weeks, and I will see you guys in the next video.